The Count, Michael Bisping's legendary career saw him headline sold-out shows across 7 countries.
I will perform, I will give you what you paid to see.
And become the first British-born world champion. It's no surprise then that he was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame in 2019, even if his path to get there wasn't a smooth one.
One of the best feelings in the world.
You look at Bisping's career and you see a fighter who climbed up the ranks by scratching and clawing 1 inch at a time. A fighter willing to pay the pound of flesh required to become a champion, and who never stopped believing he could, even when no one else believed in him.
I heard what people always said about me, do you know what I mean? So to win like that in style, yeah, felt amazing.
It's hard to look at Bisping's career and conclude that he doesn't deserve a spot among the greats. To this day, he remains one of the most popular personalities in MMA, serving as an influential commentator, analyst, and podcaster. So, without any further ado, let's take a closer look at the brutal life and career of Michael Bisping. Born in 1979 in Cyprus, where his dad was a sniper for the English army, Michael was raised in England and was a bit of a troubled kid.
I was a little rascal when I was a kid and I was always getting into street fights, so I knew I could handle myself.
He enrolled in his first jiu-jitsu classes at the age of 8.
I mean, I started doing martial arts when I was 8 years old. Fighting was something that I liked, to be honest.
In 1994, at the age of 15, he competed as an amateur in Britain's first no-hold-barred competition, a precursor to modern MMA called knockdown sport budo. As it turns out, Bisping was a talented athlete, and this led him to training in boxing, kickboxing, and karate.
You know, I never had a lot of friends and stuff, but then when I started fighting, you know, it kind of makes you more popular. So, you know, I kind of gravitated towards that a little bit because, you know, I don't know, all of a sudden I had a bunch of friends.
Michael met his longtime love, Rebecca Bisping, outside of a nightclub in Manchester in 1999. They welcomed their first child only 2 years later. Around that time, Michael became the champion of Great Britain in kickboxing, with Michael himself claiming that he became the champion 5 times. However, kickboxing wasn't paying the bills, and in his early 20s, he began jumping from a dead-end job to another between Clitheroe and Manchester in order to support his young family.
And this guy said to me, he said that I worked with my supervisor, he says, Michael, he said, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? Is this what you want to do? And I said, no. He said, well, you need to give it some thought because, you know, before you know it, 40 years will have passed, just like it did for me, you know, and you'll be an old man. And I thought, he's right. And I thought, what am I going to do with my life? And I was thinking and thinking and thinking, and I kept coming back to fighting.
He might have dabbled in a few amateur bouts during this time, although no official record of that exists. What we do know is that Bisping made his official MMA debut in 2004 at an up-and-coming British organisation called Pride and Glory. He managed to defeat his first opponent, Steve Matthews, in a matter of just 38 seconds. With an official MMA win under his belt, it was now time for Michael to take the sport more seriously.
I thought, okay, I'm going to become a professional fighter. And that's what I did.
Bisping's career in MMA began to develop rapidly, as he would fight almost monthly, picking up early knockouts and submissions in each of his fights. Throughout 2004 and 2005, Bisping managed to get over 10 professional wins against 0 losses. Because of this incredible record, promoters from all over the world had their eye on Bisping. And one of those promoters happened to be Dana White. In 2006, after 2 very successful seasons of the reality show The Ultimate Fighter, Dana White decided it was time to expand on the show and bring some overseas talent to compete in the 3rd season. One of these fighters was, of course, The Count. This new season featured 16 fighters with still feuding former champion Tito Ortiz and Ken Shamrock as coaches. Bisping, who trained under coach Tito Ortiz, blasted through the competition and made it all the way to the finals. eventually beating his opponent Josh Hayes via TKO as a light heavyweight. Crowned as the Ultimate Fighter 3 champion, Bisping secured a place in the UFC and a six-figure contract. And his career record was now 11-0. Not too shabby for someone who, only a couple of years prior, almost gave up on his fighting career to barely support his family, bouncing from one job to another. For a lot of UFC stars, their rise seems, so to speak, almost preordained.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me.
How could fighters like GSP and Anderson Silva not become legends? They were undeniably better than their competition. But after his initial ascent, Bisping's career often looked like a cruel endurance test. He would climb up only to get knocked back down. He'd build a case for a title shot, only to see it dismantled with one stumble. Still, he kept coming back.
I will perform. I will give you what you paid to see.
A living testament of perseverance. More of that in just a second. After his triumph on The Ultimate Fighter, Michael won his next 3 bouts against Eric Schaefer, Elvis Sanosic and Matt Hamill respectively, extending his record to 14-0.
Everyone, they better watch the fucking back.
However, now that Bisping was no longer fighting amateurs in England, he was up against some of the top fighters from all around the world. As the UFC became more popular, the talent pool started to increase as well, and the competition was getting more intense. In 2007, Bisping suffered his first defeat at the hand of Rashad Evans at UFC 78.
Thought it was a very close fight, you know.
While extremely disappointing at the time, this loss could, in retrospect, be described as a blessing in disguise, as it prompted Bisping to make a massive career move. Following the advice of Dana White himself, he decided to abandon the light heavyweight division and go down to middleweight. Bisping's move to the middleweight division started off pretty smoothly, winning his next 3 bouts against Charles McCarthy, Jason Day and Chris Leben.
Feel great, the pressure's off for a little while.
Despite Leben later testing positive for PEDs, resulting in Bisping facing MMA legend Dan Henderson at UFC 100 in 2009.
It was at the time the biggest card in UFC history, UFC 100.
Henderson was already a Hall of Fame-worthy talent by then. Meanwhile, Bisping was still a young fighter looking to prove himself at middleweight. To add to the stakes, the winner would get a shot against Anderson Silva, the reigning middleweight champion. Keep in mind, a few months prior, both Bisping and Henderson took part in Season 9 of The Ultimate Fighter as opposing trainers.
Hey. What the you do that for?
Making races the other day.
Team Bisping won the season and Michael showed himself as an excellent coach. But it was all now time for the two coaches to face each other on the mat and settle their rivalry once and for all.
That's it!
In the end, Bisping would be handed his first ever loss as a middleweight, with Henderson knocking him out within 3 minutes and 20 seconds in the second round.
He's still out cold, Mike.
After Bisping collapsed to the mat unconscious, Henderson landed another massive right hand, which many deemed unnecessary.
You said coming into this fight you wanted to shut him up. Mission accomplished.
Yeah, I believe I accomplished that for a little while.
If there were a list of top knockouts you could almost feel just by watching them, this one would come pretty close to the top. UFC 100 is regarded as one of the greatest fight cards of all time, and for good reason. Brock Lesnar's historic victory in the main event against Frank Mir, George St-Pierre dominating Thiago Alves in the co-main, and Michael Bisping getting brutally knocked out by Dan Henderson are all memorable moments. According to Bisping, after he came to his senses, he had no idea what was going on. Already in the dressing room, standing in the shower, he couldn't remember what he was doing there.
I didn't know what was going on. I had no idea why I was in a locker room. In my mind, I was fighting 3 months' time.
There were some people around, his manager spoke to him, but everything was like a fog. He fully realised what had happened only a few hours later on the way to the hospital. You can either be defeated and feel sorry for yourself, Bisping would later say in an interview with MMA Junkie, or you can learn from it, and that's what I did. Henderson's knockout over Bisping gave him a second life as a fighter, but instead of fighting Silva, he decided to leave the UFC for Strikeforce. There, he captured the lightweight crown and even knocked out Fyodor Emelianenko. Bisping, on the other hand, was believed by many to be already at the end of his run as a fighter. Bisping's fight history is littered with legends. The aforementioned Dan Henderson and Rashad Evans were just the start of the elite competition. Michael also shared the cage with Wanderlei Silva, Chael Sonnen,
My body still doesn't feel right, you know?
Vitor Belfort, Luke Rockhold, Anderson Silva,
No Viagra.
and GSP, among many others.
Yeah, you know, he still looks like a lizard.
We'll get to them in a moment. After his loss at UFC 100, Bisping would bounce back against Dennis Kang, defeating him with a TKO.
There's one thing about Bisping, man. He's always an exciting fight.
This resulted in a match against the Brazilian axe murderer Wanderlei Silva in 2010. Even though Bisping managed to take Silva down quite a few times, the latter won by a unanimous decision. Not only was this Silva's first win in 2 years, it was also his first fight as a middleweight. After this fight, Bisping would go on to defeat Dan Miller, Yoshiro Akiyama, Jorge Rivera, and Jason Miller, leading to a match against Chael Sonnen in 2012.
Let's be honest, I have boxing every day, all day. He's a great wrestler and I'm a great fighter.
Bisping was the clear underdog.
When all is said and done, I will still be undefeated and undisputed.
Still, he managed to stuff many of Sonnen's takedowns, scrambled back to his feet on multiple occasions, and even took Sonnen down at the end of the fight. This still wasn't enough, as Sonnen won the match via decision.
The judges are there to do a job and should judge fights correctly. I don't feel they did that tonight.
Regardless, Bisping should be proud. Many people counted him out against Sonnen, but he made it a very close fight.
He was a tough fight. There's no way around it, and I'm not going to disparage anything that he did. He's a tough fight.
Then he won his next match against Brian Sten, which finally takes us up to his 2013 fight against Vitor Belfort, in a match that, once again, had the winner advance to a middleweight title shot against Anderson Silva. The fight started out slowly. However, in the second round, Belfort landed a head kick that dropped Bisping to the mat. Referee Dan Mergliotta waved the fight off, and just like that, Bisping's title aspirations were put on hold.
Vitor Belfort has done it!
The stoppage win for Belfort came at 1 minute and 27 seconds into the second round. As solid as Bisping was during this fight, this devastating loss sent him to the back of the title contender line once again. To make things worse, the head kick caused Bisping to lose his right eye due to a retinal detachment.
So I don't really see out of it, and the vision's very blurred.
With him being 34 years old at the time, many expected him to retire.
The doctors were like, we don't recommend that you fight.
Perhaps no one suffered more from the downside of the UFC's testosterone replacement therapy era than Bisping. 3 times in his career, he was defeated by fighters who were using synthetic testosterone, exploiting a loophole that allowed for testosterone injections for those who claimed a natural deficiency. All three of those fighters, Dan Henderson, Chael Sonnen and Vitor Belfort, got shots at the UFC middleweight belt, while Bisping's path to a title shot was blocked by key losses at the wrong times.
Yes. When testosterone replacement therapy became a thing, and all you had to do was go to your doctor and said, hey, you know, I can't get a hard on or whatever, and all of a sudden they sign you off on TRT. No, I know.
Even worse, you could take steroids first and then come off of it so your testosterone was low.
Oh, really?
And you go to a doctor and say, I have low testosterone.
Oh, of course, yeah, because it messes up your natural production of it.
This is what guys did. Guys took steroids and then went in afterwards and said they have low testosterone because they were on steroids.
However, with wins and losses along the way, Bisping's career made a rebound when he defeated CB Dollaway at UFC 186 in 2015. This was followed by a victory over Charles Ladies, one of the top fighters in the division, finally earning Bisping the opportunity to face Anderson Silva in a fight that he had been chasing for years, and in his home country of England of all places. In February 2016, the stars finally aligned for Bisping to face off against Silva in London.
This fight with Anderson is a big one. I'm going home, back to England, in front of my home crowd, my friends, my family, my home nation, and the biggest fight of my career.
Bisping is one of the toughest fucking men on the planet.
Fighting in his home country of England for the first time since 2010, Bisping went for the knockout early, going for multiple kicks to the head. But Silva easily moved out of the way and landed a couple of right hands which rattled Bisping.
Oh! Here we go again. Bisping trying to fight his way off of the fence.
Toward the end of the third round, Bisping lost his mouthpiece and was calling for timeout to referee Herb Dean. He didn't allow a stoppage though, and the Spider connected with a running left knee as the round came to an end. The flying left knee left a huge gash under Bisping's left eye, his good eye.
Anderson Silva is convinced that this fight is over, but Herb Dean is saying it's not.
As Silva celebrated on top of the octagon thinking he'd won, a bloodied and dazed Bisping miraculously made his way back to his stall and answered the bell for the final rounds.
Bisping is not giving Anderson Silva an inch here.
Winning the fight on the judges' scorecards. The result had the British fans in uproar and Silva in disbelief. With this major victory under his belt, Bisping was awarded the first UFC title match of his career, 10 years after his UFC debut.
I've wanted this fight my entire life.
All three judges scored it the same, 48-47 for Bisping, with the count taking rounds 1, 2 and 4.
I was very, very blessed and honoured to share the octagon with Anderson Silva, one of the greatest martial artists that we'll ever see. And yeah, I got the job done, but it was a great night.
The decision victory was lauded, but like any Bisping accomplishment, maligned at the same time. Silva was old, people said, so what's the big deal? Well, the big deal was that now Bisping had positioned himself to face off against the reigning middleweight champion Luke Rockhold at UFC 199. Few people thought that Bisping had a chance. There were plenty of good reasons for that. Rockhold was thought to be one of the best fighters in the world, while Bisping was a solid veteran who had usually lost when it mattered. To make things worse, he was now 37 and blind in one eye. As if that wasn't enough, the two had already met in the octagon in 2014, and people had seen what Bisping could do with Rockhold. It wasn't much. Back in 2014, Rockhold dominated Bisping, handing the count the only submission loss of his career. So when this second fight was announced, everyone put their money on Rockhold. All things considered, this was a bargain, easy money. But when it comes to MMA and guarantees, there are none. The fight lasted 3 minutes and 36 seconds. Then, suddenly, Bisping dropped Rockhold with a left hook. Rockhold woozy tried to get up, but was clocked with another hard shot and never recovered. Nobody ever expected Bisping to be a world champion, but there it was. Bisping's hand was raised in victory, and he finally became the UFC middleweight champion at the age of 37. After all the ups and downs, finally Michael Bisping could call himself a UFC champion.
One of the best feelings in the world. I heard what people always said about me, do you know what I mean? So to win like that in style, yeah, felt amazing.
Now his story was complete. With this win, Michael became, at the time, the fighter with the most UFC fights before claiming gold. 26 fights later, Mike had finally done it. While other fighters were starting to fade, Bisping was still chugging along, still proving that you could get somewhere by just refusing to stop trying. Now at the top of the food chain, Bisping would defend his title against another former rival, Dan Henderson. During the fight, Michael was knocked down twice, but was still able to win the last 3 rounds, earning a unanimous decision. His next defense would be at UFC 217 against Georges St-Pierre, but he would lose via submission, along with the championship. Even when he lost the belt to St-Pierre, Bisping made the welterweight legend earn the victory with a little blood of his own. And since he apparently hadn't had enough of fighting for the month, Bisping stepped up as a short-notice replacement against Kelvin Gastelum just weeks later, losing what would be his final match. He would then finally hang the gloves up for the good of his health. As he later confessed to Joe Rogan after the knockout loss to Gastelum, he started having problems with his good eye. The fact that he was even in a position to use a phrase like that tells you all you need to know about what kind of fighter he was. The Hall of Fame kind. After 30 wins and 9 losses, Bisping would finally be inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame in March 2019. Whatever else we might say about the Count, we have to give him credit for being the human embodiment of never giving up. The ultimate proof that if you're willing to start at the bottom and do some hard work, your perseverance can take you a long way.